Hey everybody, this is Brian.
And this is Sabrina.
Ooh, I bet you didn't expect that now, did you? My lovely wife Sabrina is joining me today for this podcast. Don't worry, Josh has not gone anywhere, but we are sequencing this episode in because you always start a new year, a new season, whatever it might be, and there's always like stories behind the characters, people that you meet. So you hear my voice often, and I wanted you to hear Sabrina's voice because her voice is behind and beside my voice. So launch out onto the loop as my wife gives me funny stares across the microphone today in Curiosity Continuum. Hey everybody, this is Brian.
And this is Sabrina.
Welcome to the podcast for Curiosity Continuum.
Curiosity Continuum is an industry innovating, non-traditional company passionate about... Sorry.
That's okay.
Get that off there.
We'll get one out there. Would you even make it bigger for you? There we go.
Are we just going to continue rolling?
We're rolling.
Oh,
This is-
yeah. Okay. Curiosity Continuum is an industry innovating, non-traditional company passionate about growing wisdom in the next generation.
We are the essential bridge between the analog and digital worlds by building collaborative communities that unleash the power of adaptive expertise and innovation needed to thrive in the 21st century.
We combine and mix essential elements needed to empower people to succeed in new ways not possible outside of a creative, thoughtful, diverse community of fellow curious people.
You can follow us on your favorite podcast app and receive notifications of new content. And if you like what you hear and want to dive deeper, you can visit us at curiositycontinuum.com. Thanks for tuning in, and let's start the conversation. So, one of the things that I think was on my mind about this episode was you intersect people, and we had a conversation with our son Isaac recently about some of his customer experience things at Target. He works at Target, and he helps bring orders out and interact with customers. And when you intersect people, you never know what they're carrying.
Mm-hmm. It's very true.
So some of the things, like if those you don't know me in real life, you'll know that like I may have some really good thoughts rattling around in my head sometimes, but my wife is definitely the heart person part of this relationship. And so I want her to talk a little bit about like how she kind of reads people, because this is something where I had to get better at in our marriage about reading people's like emotional state, and she's very good at kind of reading people where they are. I think about some of the stuff happening with your dad recently, and how that affects you in your daily life.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can read people when you encounter them. Their body language, sometimes their countenance. It might be, fallen, or they might look sad, or they might just look like, I can just tell when somebody is carrying a lot and just kind of downhearted, downcast. But maybe they're closed up, with their body language. Maybe they're just frustrated. Like there's so much anxiety right now. I know that I can tell when people are just at their wits' end, which I don't think it takes long to get there these days. But size or looks that, non-expression, just closed up body. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can maybe read that.
Yeah. And I think for me too, one thing I've learned a lot this last year especially is I may hear something different than what's actually being communicated, especially like in body language. Mm-hmm. And, somebody might be irritated and it's coming toward you. It has nothing to do with you. You might be the 10th thing on their list where you just caught it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Or like you're reading your own like interpretation of what somebody said because you got your own stuff going on and you miss each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things I learned a long time ago, because I'm a crazy empath and feel like I can feel a million different things when I enter a room. just read the room pretty quick. I'm very affected by other people's. I have to guard my boundaries that way because I'm affected by other people's emotion that they might be putting off or whatever. But I learned a long time ago that 9 times out of 10, it's not you. And if it is, they will tell you if you've done something to offend them or hurt them. Or you can always ask, but chances are, even the times when I've asked, it's not been anything about me because people do have their own battles and they do have their own things that are on their minds. And they, it's so much is not about us. So much.
So how do you, when you want to start that conversation or even reach out honestly to say, hey, can I help? Tell me how you open up that conversation with people because sometimes it takes you extending yourself. And I think sometimes, especially if you're introverted, you don't necessarily want to people all the time.
Yeah.
And people are all around. And so how do you start that with people to let them know that you actually care? I mean, it probably starts with caring in the first place.
Yeah. And I think I would do a real quick self-check and be like, okay, counsel myself for a second. This is not me. Like I know I didn't do anything. And so, gosh, I wonder what is going on with them. Maybe just say, ask them how they're doing and just say, hey, I noticed that you are kind of sad, or is there anything that I can help you with is kind of a good, where you're not like diving right into maybe what's happening with them, but you're showing care, or can I do anything for you? Or, something like that
Yeah.
that shows care.
I love you say, how can I help? Because people, from a selfish standpoint, actually like to be helpful and help and know that they're being useful. But also, too, sometimes the help may come in a way of like, I just need to not talk and I may just be silent. But sometimes, too, it's like, you know what? Like, this is what's going on. And so sometimes more than like a yes or no question, that might be fine. But sometimes you might say like, how can I help you? And it's not yes or no. They might say like, hey, I just need to have a quiet moment. And hopefully they'll be able to communicate that in a way that is understandable. I think sometimes the hardest times to approach that is people where you feel, especially now, we feel so harried to run around, to just stop and have that moment. And so what are the things that like you do? I know with me, like I've seen you do this and you read people. Like how do you invite people to know that you're safe? I mean, for those of you who don't know, my wife very much is that crazy empath. Crazy, you know what I'm saying? Crazy empath. She really does invite people into that space, and they know that people can trust their soft spots with her, and not everybody is that way. I also have seen, too, especially with all the cage rattling happening in society, that sometimes the empaths just get bowled over. Because they care and they want to care. There's not, sometimes feels like there's space for it, but even more now, there's need for people to be empathic and to put it on.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely think sometimes you can feel as a sensitive person like there's not a place for you. It's just easier just to keep going and put on the happy face or just toughen up or, and it's really care that people are desiring, but sometimes it kind of may, have a crusty shell. And for me, my personality is defiant enough to go, oh, I'm going to crack your egg. I'm not okay with this weird interaction. I'm not going to go beyond my boundaries, but since I know that this is not me and I care for your heart, I'm a stick and, show you care in some way.
That's good. I think this episode really is more about understanding all the different dynamics in people's life. We talked about voices and stories. But for those of you who would have known Sabrina and not known me, you'd get a perception of Sabrina, but then you don't know all the things that, we deal with. I've talked a little bit about it as a married couple. She's giggling because she's like, oh, yes, Brian, my story is about to come out in this year. But, there's those interplays that happen. And I think the encouragement here is how do you turn on that empathy? How do you keep it on when really the world's telling you got to be tougher, you got to drive harder, and for those of you like, I don't even know how to be empathetic, right? So how would you tell me, your husband, like how would you tell me to turn empathy on
Yeah.
and still feel like I'm not going to be bowled over? I mean, I
Yeah.
guess there's that risk, but talk about that.
I think it's always knowing that there's another side to the story and just pausing and going, okay, this is not about me. What is that person maybe dealing with that I have no idea? Or where did they just come from? Or what family member may be suffering or friend that they don't have any control over? There's such a loss of control in the last few years, and that I think, though we really don't have control over much of anything in this life, the feeling of the lack of control is the worst, most maddening thing. And so I just think looking into the other side, the other person's story, and you just don't know. There's always more to the story, and I have, even being sensitive and empathetic and all of that, I've had to fight for a tender heart in the last few years. There's been a lot of reasons to harden and to just want to throw in the towel and say, screw it all. Like, everybody's rude and, but it is largely because people are dealing with so much, and it's been so much so fast, and the concentration of grief and loss and all the compounded pain, and suffering. I've had to just continue to just do those things that keep my heart tender, and choose to go, no, I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to choose to see the other side and not my own perspective. And I'm going to choose, and that's sometimes accepted by the other person and sometimes not. Sometimes you're not guaranteed you're still going to get a rude reaction or whatever. But I think if you keep yourself in check, that you're not going to get hard, because this world does need tenderness. It does need kindness. That's all those things come out of a tender place. And I'd much rather be tender than hard any day.
I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
I probably the way we'll end this episode, Josh and I talk a lot about understanding the other perspective and having that context. And we talk a lot about having a curious mind. But I think as we've tied this conversation, I also want to put out this year that you have a curious heart, that your curious heart would care for people, and that you're pairing the mind and the heart together, because that's a different dimensionality in how you would approach somebody else, how you would think about their story and your story. And the question is, how can you have a curious heart in the next interaction you have with somebody?
That's so good.
So thank you, babe, for joining me today on the podcast.
Thanks for letting me.
Until-
Thanks, Josh.
Until next time, this is Brian
This is Sabrina.
for Curiosity Continuum.